I'd like you now to close your eyes, to become comfortable where you are right now, and to bring to mind your favorite smell, the smell that's most appealing, and, if you would, to sense again that scent in mind and in both nostrils now, remembering you search and find that early childlike feeling, those special times and places, before pride, before shame, before judgment, before blame, before fear and guilt and despair, before duties and tasks and the ridiculous masks that we're so very delighted to wear. And remembering now that the outside of the outside is the inside. So, from those long-lost memories find the thread, the golden thread that leads back to this place of childhood wonder, before all things were real, that simple time, before the days of problems, upsets, stress, and worries, when endless worlds of astonishing things came to life in the telling of stories. A sensual time of smells and textures, colors too, shimmering, sparkling, changing hues, rose, lemon, peach, purple, orange, pink, a soft and subtle feeling building now within. Calmly, your breathing deepens so naturally now, finding and exploring a deeper comfort as each gentle breath you take lengthens the distance in between, remembering now what simple pleasure can be found in just following each breath in and out. You become your breathing now, deeper, longer, gentler, and taking this rhythm as yours, following and finding your own origin, the starting point of each breath, just above your navel, just below your chest, the very center of your being, this central point of consciousness, closer now within. You enter now again. This inner space, this central place of safety, a warm and deeply reassuring feeling, deepening down towards your silent center still. This source of self-protection, this place that always was before you were a thing, when you were simply this. No face, no name, no number, just you, just bliss. When these words, once upon a time, revealed to you within the mirror of your mind an inner place of imagination where nothing is real, but you can find a deeper truth revealed, reflected there, flickering dimensions where there is no thing that cannot be. Your focus changes. Now you see a picture, a moving picture, a vision, a slowly unfolding understanding of yourself, perhaps, and of just how all this came to be. A shimmering cloud of moving colors, and the threads of a story begin slowly to emerge. You see something that looks like a path along which one might walk, a different path that leads away from the busy main road and away from the social commotion of the village and of the houses, an intriguing path that winds away from the usual and from the ordinary, and going just a little further down this curious path, past the old wood, along by the river, and over the bridge to the other side. And just a few steps further than one might normally venture, you see, standing there in the very center of the old enchanted field, surrounded by growing saplings, a vast and ancient great oak tree. A truly wondrous being, this silently solid, immensely strong, resilient tower of living wood, its huge limbs effortlessly stretching outwards and upwards towards heaven itself. Its countless oak leaves swaying gently and easily now in the late afternoon summer's breeze. Such a delightful picture of peace and tranquility, of quiet, untroubled calm and serenity. But, as is the nature of the world and of all things in it, nothing ever stays the same, change being the true form and the flavor of all things. And so, in this way, as you take in this beautiful scene, you notice the weather is beginning to change. And as the wind slowly rises, billowy clouds are coming to cover this scene. Long, soft drops of rain appear. Rabbits disappear, diving down deep into their dry burrows as intermittent shafts of sunlight dart through the spaces in the gathering rain-filled clouds. The light reflecting now on the ancient oaks newly wet and flashing shiny bright green leaves, tumbling about in the turbulent wind, yet these leaves hold fast, assured of their anchor, confident in their connection to their origin, their source of life, the tree from which they sprout and wave about ever more wildly in the strengthening gusts of wind. And when it gets wetter is the time to take shelter. So come now and stand under the protective cover of the oak's cathedral-like canopy and be amazed as the rising noise of the outside storm is quickly quietened, muffled, and made distant by the dense layer of foliage swaying slowly above. And see, now, there, high up in the branches, utterly unmindful of the gathering storm, and completely unconscious of the deliciously juicy but rapidly diminishing acorn on which it absently nibbles away, oblivious even to the branch underneath its bottom, sits an anxious red squirrel, as if in a desperate great hurry, quite lost in his thoughts of his own little fraught world of worry, thinking thought after thought after thought after thought after thought after thought after thought. This poor little animal is completely transfixed by his increasingly rapid stream of thoughts, each one popping fully formed into his squirrely little mind, one thought after another, with no gap, no room, and no space in between them, coming so quickly now that this little squirrel is becoming truly agitated, increasingly upset, and dreadfully distressed as it tries and it fails to catch and examine each swirling thought as it flies through its feverish mind, each thought of which was a worrisome worry, and each of those worries demanding twice as much as all of his remaining available attention, appearing in his head so rapidly now that this little squirrel is beginning to think more than one thought at a time. And, in fact, for the squirrel, it feels like 4 or 5 at a time, no longer able to focus on each flapping thought as it flies through his frantic mind. So many thoughts indeed there were, flying about in this little squirrel's head, that an outside observer might remark that the number of thoughts it was thinking seemed as many and as numerous as the leaves of the great oak tree in which our little acorn nibbler sat. And if that outside observer could see into the little squirrel's mind, they might also remark that those millions of thoughts which were weaving and wandering their way around in much the same manner and to as much the same purpose as those millions of leaves being blown about in the branches above, in the blustery, buffeting wind. That is to say, to no purpose whatsoever. Yet still he munches, still completely oblivious to the tree in which he sits, and the acorn on which he munches, held so very, very tightly between his two little paws. He thinks while he munches, and he munches while he thinks. He munches while he thinks, and he thinks while he munches while he thinks. And from time to time, he remembers a time in his past, a golden age it seems to him, when he was a younger happier little squirrel, when everything had seemed to be quite right in his life, taking each day as it arrived, never thinking about the past, unconcerned about a future which can never be known, uncaring about his place in the world, and filling his days with his very favorite thing, which was to sit in the branches of the oak tree, enjoying the beautiful view and focusing intently on each and every acorn that came his way, taking all the time in the world to scrutinize each one, checking for flaws and blemishes, and looking out for extra fat content, whilst savouring the flavour, the texture, and the nutalicious nuttiness of the very essence of each delicious nut. But then, one day, something changed. Something became serious, and the fun fell out and faded away from his furry little existence. Something seemed to change about the very nature of the world and the little squirrel's place in it. He started thinking about things, and the more he grew, the more he seemed to lose himself in his thoughts. And as he grew bigger, it slowly became apparent to the little animal that one day he would become an adult squirrel, which meant that he would have to leave his play and become serious about things and learn to look after himself. And it was at this point that he started to spend even more time thinking about things. And very soon indeed, our little squirrel found that an awful lot of the thoughts that he was thinking were worrisome thoughts, and those worrisome thoughts were all worries about the future and how he would cope if all of the terrible things that he thought might possibly happen actually did happen. And then what would he do? How would he survive? What'll I do if this happens? What'll I do if that? What if nothing turns out right? What if I meet a cat? What then? 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 What if I go for a wander and I can't get back to my tree? What if I'm lost forever? What's going to happen to me? What then? 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 What if the oak tree falls over? What if I fall on my head? What if there aren't any more acorns? What if I starve till I'm dead? What then? 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 The little squirrel had come to see himself as a lonesome, solitary soul, separated from and up against and at the mercy of the world and all its many, many dangers, with no idea as to how he would manage or survive or prosper. Our little squirrel felt that he had no more control over his life than any of the oak tree's leaves that were blown about in the wind every day. And still he thought, and still he nibbled, and he nibbled while he thought, and he thought whilst he nibbled. And just as the storm reached its highest point, he nibbled away the very last little bit of nibbleable acorn. And at that precise moment, there was a flash of lightning and a single clap of thunder of quite the most enormous magnitude, which so surprised the little squirrel that all of his thoughts and all of his worrisome worries, every single last one of them, just simply stopped and where bough met squirrel bottom, a feeling was felt, a feeling of deep connection and of belonging and of deep, deep understanding. And he saw and he understood the true root of all his problems and of all his upsets and of all his worries. He saw now how this had all come to be. It had all started when he began to explore the world around the tree in which he lived as a young squirrel. He found saplings surrounding the tree, and then he found the grass that grew further out. And as he wandered ever further, he came across the path that led to the old mill pond, round and flat and mysterious, a world of its own, promising new experience. And peering over the bank and down into the water of the pond, he saw, for the first time, fishes swimming there, darting about this way and that. And as he gazed in fascination into the water, he saw things there that he believed that he had seen somewhere else before. He saw clouds in the water, and he shouted aloud in excitement, "So that's where clouds get their rainwater. They soak themselves in the pond first." But a passing rabbit laughed and said, "No, no, no. There's no need to be silly. The clouds are not in the water down there. Those clouds you think you see are not clouds. They're mere reflections, images of clouds, pictures playing on the surface of the water. And if you have the time to wait, you'll see a bird or two, no doubt. And perhaps, if you can stay still long enough, you might even see yourself as well," said the rabbit. Our little squirrel was rather puzzled by this last remark about seeing himself. But he kept on looking, and, sure enough, he saw a bird reflected there, and then some more. He saw the sun shining up and the tops of the trees peering down, and was delighted and amazed at this new world of wonder he had discovered. But then he saw something else. Something that turned his own world upside down and inside out. Our little squirrel saw his own face reflected on the surface of the pond, and, believing what he saw was his own self, he began to panic, and he let out a little whimper of despair. "What's the matter?" asked the rabbit, suddenly concerned that there might be approaching danger. "Look," said the squirrel, "I've fallen into the water and I'm going to drown." He wailed plaintively. "Look, there I am, down there, with the fishes." "Oh, you're just being silly again," replied the rabbit, very much relieved. "You're no more in the water than the clouds are." The squirrel looked at the rabbit, looked back in the water, then looked back at the rabbit again. So the squirrel I see in the water isn't me?" asked the squirrel. "Of course it isn't you," replied the rabbit. "Otherwise you'd be very wet and gasping for breath, wouldn't you? And you're not, are you?" The squirrel considered this, and he realized it was true. And it was true, because it is true. "And what's also true," said the rabbit, reading the squirrel's mind, "is that when you're thinking of yourself, when you picture yourself in the mirror of your mind, then the image you have of yourself when you're imagining your past, your present, or your future, that couldn't be you either. And that's more true than anything else." "Why is that more true than anything else?" asked the squirrel. "Because," replied the rabbit to the squirrel, "if it's you that's doing the imagining, then what you're imagining couldn't possibly be you, could it? Which is a very good thing to remember, because if you forget and muddle them up, if you think that the things that you're thinking about are real, then it's all rather too easy to fall into the trap of worrying about imaginary things. And the most imaginary thing of all of the things that you can possibly see in the mirror of your mind is your own self." This last bit puzzled the squirrel, but he put it to the back of his mind, and he decided that he would take the time to consider this properly when he had a moment to do so. But our little squirrel never got back to that thought. His worries had already begun their long and winding journey from thinking to concern to worry and on to a very, very stressful existence, an existence that led right up to this very moment when the clap of thunder empties the squirrel's mind completely. And now, sitting on his branch, wide-eyed in amazement, his mind open and empty, our little squirrel suddenly understands all of this clearly, just like you are now beginning to do. See this now. See, as our little squirrel begins to see the true nature of his own self. Our little squirrel sees clearly that he has mixed up and muddled up and completely confused the world of experience with the world of his imagination, as reflected in the mirror of his own mind. That is to say, that he finally understands that the squirrel he was worrying about was an imaginary squirrel, an image of a squirrel, not him at all, but merely the image he had made of himself in his own imagination. The squirrel he imagined he saw in the mirror of his mind when he thought about himself. And he sees now that this squirrel is not truly him, couldn't possibly be him, because, after all, this squirrel is no more real than was the image that he had seen of himself reflected on the surface of the pond all that time ago. And he saw that the thoughts that he thought and which flew about in his mind every day were, in truth, no more important and not really any different to the leaves of the oak tree that blew about in the wind every day. The squirrel's thoughts appeared naturally and flapped about in his head according to his feeling, very much like the leaves above his head, which also appeared naturally and which were blown about according to the weather. And he saw clearly, and without any doubt whatsoever, that picturing himself in his own mind as a thing was the real root, the true root of all his anxiety, and that all of his anxiety grew out of this and from nothing else. And once our little red squirrel saw the truth of this, he was free, and he reminded himself every time he started to imagine himself in his own mind to simply stop. Our own thoughts and our own worries, our concerns and our fears are no different from those of the little red squirrel. They come, they go, but in themselves, individually, they mean nothing at all whatsoever. Thoughts and concerns and worries and fears are the natural output of the human mind, no different from the leaves on the vast oak. Just as an oak tree grows oak leaves, so does a squirrel mind grow squirrel thoughts, just like a human mind grows human thoughts. And when the weather is still, when the weather is calm, the leaves are still and calm too. When the weather is turbulent, they fly madly about, all over the place, but the tree takes no notice of either. Why would it? And why should you? You see, and yes, you do see so very clearly now that just as the oak tree is so much more than any of its leaves, you are far, far, far more than any of your thoughts. And so, if you become lost in your thoughts, you'll not be able to enjoy your acorn. You'll forget that you are truly part of this tree, standing in the beautiful countryside, open to the elements. And so, you will remember always that the picture, the image, the idea you have of yourself in your mind is only that, a picture, an image, an idea, and no more you than any picture of you, no more you then the reflection in the mirror is you. No more you than the squirrel's reflection of himself that he saw in the pond. And if your mental weather becomes turbulent, should a sudden and immediate storm arise, filling your mind with alarming thoughts and worries about the future and what might happen, then you'll quickly and clearly remember that all of your worry and all of your upset and all of your fears and all of your anxieties concern not your true self, your indestructible, eternal, undying self. No. All of your worry and all of your upset and all of your fears and all of your anxieties concern only the image you have of yourself, the picture you maintain of yourself, the idea of yourself that you have created in your own mind, a fantasy figure, a mental creation, a dream figure that could never, ever be you. So, disassociate yourself now from this picture, this image, this idea, and feel now again the freedom of being unbound by your own mind, the deepest peace. All is well. All is well. All is well, and you are wonderful. And any time in the future that you begin to see yourself, any time that you begin to picture yourself, any time that you begin to imagine yourself as something that pleases or displeases, worries or upsets you, then you will remember that this could never, ever be any more than an image created in your own mind. You will smile to yourself and realize and remember that your anxieties only relate to your image of yourself, your idea of yourself, your picture of yourself, and not at all to your true self, your eternal and undying self. Your true self, your eternal self, your undying self, wears no masks or identifies with any persona, and so, therefore, is naturally clear and naturally pure and shines forth easily and effortlessly from your own inner space, the inner space that is what you truly are. The channel that connects you to your own still, untroubled center has been reopened and is now, as I speak, filling your life with light again, filling you with confidence, with reassurance, and with a joyful positivity that will carry you onwards now through whatever life can possibly throw at you. When you were very small, before you knew your name, before you had a face, you knew all of this, absolutely, completely, and without question. When you were very small, before you knew your name, before you had a face, you saw this so very clearly indeed. So, you see this again now. You see this now. Be this now. You do see this, and so, therefore, you can be this now and forever. And in accepting this, you find again, you taste again, now, in this present moment, the deepest peace. Feel that peace. Go deeper into this peace. Now, becoming this peace. Now, and allowing all of your remaining anxieties to evaporate completely, completely and absolutely, right down to the roots. Allow yourself to begin anew, freed from images of yourself, freed from ideas of yourself, living only in this moment of perfect presence, the only place that you could ever be. Simple, easy, straightforward, natural, the way it was always supposed to be. Be this now. Good. So good. This is you. And slowly, slowly, gently and assuredly, you now begin to return to full consciousness, confident, assured, relieved, rejuvenated, encouraged and comforted, optimistic and well, in heart, in mind, and in body. Your eyes open now, and you return in this moment to the world, knowing that you have begun again as new. That's right. Hello.